Welcome into episode 146 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
Should you be running beta software? Should anyone block Apple's silent updates? And should there really be an app for a flatiron? Find out on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. After 13 years of doing a daily Apple News and news related to Apple News show, macOS Can, Tell Your Friends, after 13 years of that, I worry sometimes that I give Apple too much of the benefit of the doubt. I don't think so in this case, but I want you to check me on this if you would, August. A number of sites earlier this week covered a security problem with the betas for iOS 13 and iPadOS. Now, if you're like me, you say, well, that's because they're betas, and I personally don't think you're wrong. But so many people run the betas that it is worth mentioning. Apple Insider says the bug, which reportedly grants unauthenticated access to usernames and passwords, sounds worse than it is. The problem occurs in the Settings app. Within the app, the piece says people can repeatedly tap on the website and app passwords option and bypass Face ID, Touch ID, or a passcode. Of course, to access the Settings app, the device would have to be unlocked already, which is why it sounds worse than it is. I guess let's start there. I'm not even sure it's possible to have a phone with no passcode or biometric lock at this point. No iPhone, anyway. Assuming there is a way to leave your phone unlocked, should anyone ever do this ever?
Absolutely not. I know it can be convenient, especially if you have an older phone without Touch ID or Face ID. But if you accidentally leave that phone somewhere, whoever picks it up has access to everything inside, all of your websites, and so much more. So just please, for your own security, make sure at the very minimum you at least have a passcode.
Yeah, because don't forget, it's not just you, right? If you've got anybody in your address book and somebody picks up your phone and they're able to get into it, well, then they don't just have your information, they have all your friends' information as well, and maybe your friends aren't so cool with some random guy or gal having all their stuff.
Exactly. You know, I was actually going through some of my old notes in the Note app the other day. Mm-hmm. And I pulled up something that I had written down probably close to 8-9 years ago. And it was a password that you'd given me for a task that you wanted me to try and check in for you.
Right.
And I deleted the note immediately, but it's just one of those things where exactly what you're talking about, you know, you never know what information you're giving away if somebody gets hold of your phone.
Now, what I found myself thinking when this story hit, as I said earlier, betas have bugs. I mean, that's what betas are for, isn't it?
Absolutely. They're intended to, number one, let developers bring their apps up to speed with the new OS. And number two, let people report back to Apple any bugs that they find so Apple can fix those and make sure that when it goes out as a production OS, it doesn't have any of those bugs.
Okay, so with that as our groundwork, can you really consider anything in a beta to be a problem?
Well, sure. Are you going to have bugs like this one? Absolutely. Is this a really big deal? No. It's, as long as you've got a passcode on your phone, it's really hard to exploit this bug. But it is a bug, and it could potentially be a problem if it gets to production. In the past, we've seen bricking of phones with OS updates, deletion of iTunes libraries, all kinds of nastiness that we've seen with betas. And according to Mr. Tacek, the current Mac and iOS betas can potentially blow away your iCloud data. In most cases, Apple can restore that, but it's not something that most people really want to deal with.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing because he sent us both that note before the show. The problem was it was blowing out some iCloud content, like you say, but you think, well, that's no big deal because I'm running it on this sort of quarantine phone. Except iCloud means the phone is no longer quarantined. So if you've got like even an old phone running iOS 13, but then it does this iCloud thing. All of a sudden, all your other devices are like, oh, I guess we're taking stuff out of iCloud now. And so things that you have access to on your pristine iOS 12 phone, that's sort of an issue as well. So I can see there, I mean, yes, I can see there where a problem in beta becomes like a problem.
Sure. And in those cases, what you should really do is make sure that you have on that second phone a second iCloud account that doesn't interfere with your normal day-to-day data.
Or would you even have an iCloud account at that point? I mean, would you turn iCloud off on a beta phone? That's what I'm wondering about. Because
thing we always absolutely a possibility.
Okay. Because I was going to say the thing we always hear is you should only run this like on a phone that is not actually important, that you're not actually using. Not that you're not using it, but I mean, it is an extra device. It's a test device. But then if you're going to tie it into everything that is actually your, functioning devices, there's always the chance of trouble. Now, when Apple has a public beta program, or when the cost to enter is literally just a cost, $99 a year to be in the developer program, and I know a couple of guys who used to pay that just to be, up with the first iOS betas, not a developing bone in their bodies, as we might say, and yet, because they're full grown, so their bones have stopped developing. Sorry. They're not developers is my point, but they were paying $99 to be in the developer program. Also, they could get that, bleeding edge OS onto their phone and then complain about it. Here's the thing, though. When the barrier to entry is lower, I mean, do we need to start thinking of issues in betas as actual problems?
I do think the issues are problems, but since it's not production software, it's not everyone's problems. It's just the problems for those who installed the beta. And that's sort of the idea of betas, so that Apple can fix those problems before they become widespread. Mm-hmm. Anyone who installs a beta needs to understand the risks. For the developer betas, even Apple implores developers to only install them on test devices. And that's really, really good advice. Using a second phone or a test Mac or whatever. Not your everyday, I need it no matter what device. For the non-developer, if you're crazy enough to spend $100 just to have the new hotness on your phone, you have to remember that the new hotness just might burn you.
Nicely done. I won't go so far as to say that Apple's encouraging everyone to run the betas, but lowering the bar as much as they have. Have they given a false sense of security, literally and figuratively, around, this really not ready for primetime software?
They have introduced public betas, and that lets anyone who wants to give the new OS a go. And these versions are usually a step or two behind the developer betas, which lets Apple sort of make sure that they're not going to brick a phone or whatever. So they're a little more safer, but there's still going to be some problems there. I do agree that they've loosened up a lot with betas over the last several years. Does it give a false sense of security? Maybe, but I still don't think those installing betas are average users. My wife, I asked her, and she didn't even know there was a public beta available until I asked her about it. So this isn't something that is widespread knowledge. It's not something that your folks are probably going to be doing. It's, us hardcore Mac users who just want the new shiny thing. And that's fine as long as we know that, that new shiny thing might have teeth.
Again, given how low the bar is, I'm wondering, and maybe you just said it, it's the hardcore users, who should actually be running the various OS betas?
Who should run the OS betas? Well, here's to the crazy ones, the square pegs and the round holes. No, seriously, if you're adventurous and can handle the risk, you might be a candidate. If you're willing to report bugs back to Apple, you're even more of a candidate. But if you're somebody who depends on your device every single day and would be lost without it, you're probably not the right person for a beta.
Now, I'm wondering, would you take that on a case-by-case basis? Like, I don't run any of the betas on anything. I am often tempted on tvOS because it's just a TV. And sure. There are weeks that I don't turn on the TV except for on Friday night when I'm watching Stranger Things or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Or actually, you see, there's what I'm not even thinking about, though. I use it for the Star Trek stuff I do as well for another podcast. So, I mean, are there devices that you're like, yeah, I wouldn't care. Do it with tvOS, fine. Maybe don't do it with, your iPad or your iPhone. Or is it just, are you sort of all or nothing when it comes to the beta thing?
For me, and this is going to sound silly, the differentiation I make is how hard is it to install. Apple TV and HomePod betas are a lot harder to install than Mac, iOS, and Watch. So my Mac, iPhone, and Watch are all running betas, but nothing else is. That said, in full transparency, I still get burned from time to time. I do. Computer restarts, freezes, apps that don't run, all kinds of crazy nonsense. I've never had any data loss, fortunately, but I'm also willing to accept that risk if it happens. I do backups and all of that kind of thing. I'm not going to go crying to a Mac news site saying the beta broke my phone when I'm the one who chose to install it. And maybe that's the true test. Can you take the heat without complaining about it?
Back to what brought us here originally, the whole, accessing passwords and things without proper authorization. Apple has been warned about that problem, but has yet to acknowledge it, according to Apple Insider. However, the site does go on to remind people that betas are betas, inherently prone to bugs, they say. Chances are better than good that Apple will have this issue hammered out in a future beta, let alone by the time the operating system actually launches for the rest of us. No doubt you remember the zooming around we did last week. First, there was the fact that Zoom, the video conferencing app, had a flaw that let people remotely turn on a user's webcam without the user's express consent. Then, just before we recorded last week's show, came word that Apple had pushed a quiet patch, solving what some saw as an equally nefarious issue. Zoom was found to leave a web server on an affected Mac, even after someone theoretically uninstalled the Zoom client. Now The Verge says Apple has issued another, silently updating Macs again to remove insecure software from Zoom's partners. Apparently the video conferencing app Zoomoo and RingCentral, that's two apps, Zoomoo and RingCentral, used technology from Zoom. That means they left vulnerabilities from Zoom as well. Specifically, the report says they installed secondary pieces of software that could take commands from websites to open your webcam in a video conference without your intervention. And just like uninstalling Zoom before its updates, uninstalling Zoomoo and RingCentral did not remove the secondary web server, hence the need for Apple's behind-the-scenes intervention. Now, last week I talked jokingly about levels of comfort with Apple's behind-the-scenes fixes. The issue we had was Zoom doing stuff behind the scenes about which we didn't know, which made us angry. But Apple does stuff behind the scenes about which we didn't know to fix the Zoom thing. And yay, I believe is what I said last week. Good, maybe. No, it turns out I wasn't the only one who was, who saw that parallel, let's say. Cult of Mac has run a report on how to disable those silent updates. Not that there are that many steps involved. August is going to tell us how to stop the silent updates from happening, and then we're going to talk about whether or not people should actually stop them. Let's start with how to do it if you're gonna, though. Mr. Trometer, I want to turn off Apple's silent behind-the-scenes updates. How do I go about it?
Apple makes this surprisingly simple. In Mojave, open your system preferences, choose software update. In the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a button that says advanced. Click that, and it'll bring down a little sheet where you'll see a handful of check boxes, including one that says install system data files and security updates. Uncheck that, and it won't update those automatically for you anymore.
Done and done, except is this something I should have done, or is this something I should do? Is this something that you would suggest?
Never. I would never suggest this.
Okay.
The behind-the-scenes update like this is something Apple rarely does. I understand that it may feel creepy that they're updating apps when you're not looking, but in this case, they're doing so in your best interests. Leaving this on just makes sure that you're protected. But if you're the paranoid type, and I get that, and you really don't like the idea of automatic updates, turn it off. But then you need to stay super vigilant and do manual updates at least once a week. Imagine you were running the Zoom app and you didn't know about this bug. You could have sites accessing your camera without your permission. With auto updates turned on, Apple took care of that for you. If you're going to do it manually, you need to stay on top of it. You could probably make the case that if it's a work computer that's controlled by your employer through like device management, you might not need this on. But let your employer decide that. Don't fiddle with it. The bottom line, you're already trusting Apple to help you manage things like your photos, your music, your passwords. You're probably in good hands if you let them manage situations like this too. So just leave it checked.
We're going to do our hair in a moment, but do we really need to use an Internet of Things thing for that? We'll find out. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. They may say it with pride, they may say it with shame. We've all got friends or family members who will proclaim, "I don't know anything about computers," as if that's going to keep them safe. You may get nowhere telling them about phishing attacks or password safety. At the very least, though, they should be running good security software. Tell them, please, about MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at their Macs. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. You can't stand over everyone's shoulder. Let MacScan 3 keep them safe in the background. Have mom, dad, your uncle, whoever needs it, sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Their 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. How many times has this happened to you? You're standing there holding your flatiron, straightening your hair, thinking to yourself, "I wish I could also hold my phone in my other hand and control my curling iron that way." Here's a thing that should have never been a thing, according to TechCrunch: Bluetooth connected hair straighteners. Glamorizer, a UK firm that bills itself as the maker of the world's first Bluetooth hair straightener, allows users to link the device to an app which lets the owner set certain heat and style settings. The app can also be used to remotely switch off the straighteners within Bluetooth range. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking there's some security vulnerability in the app, and that would not be a surprise. But the problem from the TechCrunch point of view, these hair straighteners can be hacked. Security researchers at Pen Test Partners were easily able to send malicious Bluetooth commands within range to remotely control an owner's hair straightener. Maybe you're thinking, who cares? Well, with the app, you can control the temperature in a range from 122 degrees Fahrenheit to 455 degrees Fahrenheit. You can also decide how long the device stays on, up to 20 minutes, which means you could conceivably set the thing to run for 20 minutes at 455 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a burn or fire hazard. As there is no pairing or bonding established over Bluetooth when connecting a phone, anyone in range with the app can take control of the straighteners, according to the researchers. We talk about the Internet of Things on this show fairly frequently. I guess what I'm wondering is, would we consider this thing an Internet of Things thing? I mean, there's an app for your phone, but it's got to be within Bluetooth range. It's not like I can log into your hair straightener, August, from where I am. Is this an IoT thing?
I would consider it an IoT thing because it's a connected device. It connects to your device, and your device potentially connects to the internet, which makes this, to me, an IoT thing. Now, does it connect directly to the internet? No. Can it be controlled directly over the internet? No. But at some point, somebody's going to go, well, if the Bluetooth hair straightener is working really well, we should have an internet hair straightener.
Because that does sound like the best idea ever. I'm going to throw in a thing here. I have a question, but I'm going to answer it as well. What sort of things should people look for when buying an Internet of Things device? Can I just go ahead and throw in my vote for, do you really need it to be connected? You're holding your hair straightener. Well, I mean, what? Sorry, that's my first thing. But what other kinds of things? Oh, that was yours, wasn't it? You had that as well. Oh, look at that. I stepped on your line. I am so sorry. I stepped on your line. Let's pretend I didn't just do that, and I'll ask the question. What sorts of things should people look for when buying an Internet of Things thing?
I think the only question really is, do you really need it as a connected device? This hair straightener definitely falls into that category. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, while some of these things sound cool, and they do sound cool, they tend to be more expensive just because of the electronics, and more fiddly because you have to use an app, etc. I'll give you a perfect example. I've got a device in my kitchen. I used to have one that was not an IoT device. Mm-hmm. But it broke. And so I bought a new one that is an IoT device. And now the only way to control it is with my phone. And it drives me crazy because the other one just had a nice little dial. I could just, click, 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 boom. And I'm off to the races. And now I have to open the app and get it connected. And it's just fiddly. And we don't need that for everything.
See, I'm going to be, I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. I always think about one thing that happened one time and how much I would love it if it had been an IoT thing. And then I remind myself it was one thing that happened one time. It was, my laundry used to be 2 floors down from the rest of the house. It was in the basement. And one time I didn't realize that it had gone off balance and I was supposed to go someplace and I was washing the thing I was going to wear and I had to wear something else. And is that really worth opening up the security vulnerability because I didn't realize that my clothes were going to be wet for 20 minutes longer than they actually were?
I think a lot of times you find manufacturers who have a perfectly good product, mm-hmm. but they're trying to find a way to get people to buy the newer version, mm-hmm. or they're looking for a way to up the price. And one of the ways that they do that is by, oh, look, here, you can, your dryer will alert you if it's off kilter, right. That kind of thing. And you never end up using that. And you just wish you had the other one back.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also just the first to market thing as well, right? I mean, Glamorizer brags about the fact that they're the first Bluetooth connected flat iron. They may also end up being the only Bluetooth connected flat iron. I kind of hope they are, but somebody's got a gold star next to their name because way to go, Tommy. You beat Con Air or whoever it is, not the movie, but the the hair care product people. So let's say you did go ahead and buy an IoT thing. What sort of things should you think about? What sort of things should you look for once you actually get one of these internet connected devices into your home?
Well, if it's a device I just can't live without, I get it set up. But then I also look for red flags while I set it up. I ask questions like, am I comfortable with the procedure? The setup procedure, that is. Is anyone else going to be able to connect to this besides me? And can I control that? Can I limit who gets access to it? I'd also recommend the IoT Inspector, which is software we talked about several weeks back on the show. It's an open source app out of Princeton that lets you monitor your IoT devices that are connected to your network.
I want to go specifically to the Glamorizer, that part where there is no pairing. I mean, that should be a red flag, right? I mean, like you said in your list there, like, can other people log into this? Can I control whether other people can log into this? I mean, the second that you had an app that you download and there's no, passcode to control the really hot thing, I mean, if you get something, it's like, yeah, just connect to this, and you've had to do no pairing, you've had to do no locking it down. I mean, I'm assuming this is a thing that you would unplug and hope that just unplugging it was enough.
Yeah, I think they named it the wrong thing. They call it the Glamorizer, but it should have been called the Fahrenheit 450 Oops.
Yeah. It's got a horror movie feel to it, honestly.
But that's a huge red flag, and that's the craziest part to me. I've talked on here before about the neighbor's kid who has a lot of time on his hands to check out networks around him and just cause mayhem. This could set your house on fire. It doesn't give your data away, but it could set your house on fire. And I can't believe the engineers who designed this just didn't see that coming.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for half a second, not just because the devil would like to see people's houses burned down. We talked earlier about how the initial problem that we talked about with the iOS beta wasn't nearly as big a problem as it might seem, because you would have to be in an unlocked phone before you could actually get in to access all the passwords, right? You have to be in somebody's house. You have to be close enough to somebody's flatiron that you can actually activate it with this Bluetooth thing, and you have to have the app. I mean, I feel like this is a best practices case study more than it's an actual concern for this particular thing. Unless you're like living, the reboot of Single White Female.
Potentially, but also if you're living in an apartment complex and the person's bathroom is right through that wall right over there, that's close enough for Bluetooth.
Yeah, that's true. But then you have to know that it's there as well. Unless you're like really weird and downloading this app going, someday. If you're looking for some kind of comfort, by the way, or reassurance around the Glamorizer specifically, the piece says that the straighteners only allow one concurrent connection. If the owner hasn't connected their phone or they go out of range, only then can an attacker target the device.
So they can only burn down your house when they're not home.
Right. They can only burn down your house when you're sleeping or not there. So really, that's much better. Personally, I say you're beautiful the way you are. Curly hair is nature's gift. Also, just because there's an app for it doesn't mean there should be. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. You'll find notes for all the shows that we've done before and all the shows coming up once they become shows that we've done before. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.